In Flagler, Rockefeller gained a mental and spiritual kin. They lived with each other all day, sharing the same office, walking to and fro from work, spending many evenings with each other. Skipping down a bit, let us imagine the sort of problems that Rockefeller and Flagler discussed in their daily conversations. There was certainly little to complain about for the present. The firm was the largest in Cleveland. A credit statement of a Cleveland bank supplied at the time to a New York bank says that Rockefeller's firm had a capital of $1 million, of which $360,000 was invested in the refinery and real estate and $600,000 in the business. The company had big storage facilities for oil. This was decidedly an asset, since the price of crude and refined varied so much that the art of making money in oil was largely a strategy of when to buy and when to sell. Oil storage, therefore, was vital. But problems were looming. Production of oil had almost doubled from 1863 to 1870, from 2.6 million to 4.7 million barrels, while refinery capacity had grown faster. So the refineries were ready for an even bigger push in oil production to come. Quote, however, consumer demand had not kept pace. The margin between crude prices and refined was dropping. When Rockefeller went into the oil business at the start of 1863, crude sold for $2 a barrel, which at 42 gallons per barrel meant that less than 5 cents a gallon. The refined price was 40 cents a gallon. This was quite a margin, even though 5 gallons of crude were needed to make 3 gallons of refined. In addition, the cost of barrels and transportation was high. Moving the stuff around was high. And the cost of refining was 5 cents a gallon. Now, it mentions here it takes 5 gallons of crude to make 3 gallons of refined oil. 2 gallons get taken off in stuff which is ultimately sometimes usable, but it's not the oil that they're looking for. I'm not sure that they had developed all the methods of using those resources back then. Now, I just want to interpose here and say what would happen in this case. Look at this: refining capacities overdone and production capacity is overdone. So then, at the end of this boom of investment, which refineries are going to close down? Which ones? The weakest ones, the crappiest ones, the ones that can't make go, the ones that aren't paying their workers as well as the other ones, the ones that aren't doing as good of a job serving the customers, the ones that aren't as efficient. So this is going to make a huge wave of refineries open, and then the most inefficient of those will close down immediately in the recession following the boom. Immediately a bunch of them close down, and the other ones take on a lot of those workers, but to the extent that they don't, the workers are just off to the next thing or whatever, go try to pick apples, whatever they want to do. But they were all free to go ahead and invest in that and try to get the next, bonanza of the part of the oil business. They should all be free to go jump in there and try their hand at that. And when the recession comes and we've got double the production capacity we need, then half of the factories, the least efficient half, or more, maybe not as many, maybe 10% of the factories will close. But whichever. Just want to interject there and show that doesn't need a remedy by the state. To the extent that that's a problem, it's just a problem that we can be fascinated by, the fact that this is the best society humankind's ever seen. The operations of the free market might yet wreck all the refiners if the margin kept going down. So that's a little bit of claptrap we've just addressed, isn't it? Going down a page, the oil Dorado reached its, El Dorado is the land of gold, so oil Dorado is the land of oil. Very cheap Americanism. The oil Dorado reached its most feverish pitch as the Civil War came to its end. Soldiers swarmed into the oil regions, and employers took pride in the number of heroes they could hire. These new arrivals came at the same time as rich new strikes were made. J.T. Trowbridge, writing in the Atlantic Monthly in 1869, said, quote, almost everybody you meet has been suddenly enriched or suddenly ruined, perhaps both within a short space of time, or knows plenty of people who have. Now there's a lengthy story about a guy named Coal Oil Johnny. It's a legend and a story. It's a mixture, can't be unwoven now. It's about this guy who lights cigars with $100 bills and all the stuff about the stupidest capitalist, you know. Began an orgy of spending that amazed the country. Blazing with diamonds, he leased the hotel in Philadelphia for a day for $8,000 because they wouldn't fire a particular clerk. All kinds of stuff. He lighted cigars with $100 bills, tipped boot blacks with gifts of the same denomination, gave gifts of expensive diamonds to anyone who struck his fancy. You know, you wouldn't believe it in a novel, and I don't know that it's true. After spending $500,000, he went broke when his well went dry. He ended as a baggage clerk. Although many jeered at the exploits of Coal Oil Johnny, he had fun losing his fortune. Others just saw theirs go down the drain. Fortune hunters poured into the area. On a trip to Oil Creek, Andrew Carnegie was amused to see a sign by a derrick, quote, "To hell or China," end quote. He and his partners bought a farm and set up a company to drill for oil on it. Now they're coming in the middle of a bit of a hectic thing here. The farm rose in value to $5 million, and the wealth helped to establish the great Carnegie fortune. Now a little anecdote about the city of Pithole, P-I-T-H-O-L-E. Quote, "The short life of the city of Pithole was so bizarre that a few years later there was wonderment as to whether it had been a reality or a dream. Oil was found in early 1865 on the farm of Thomas Holmden, 6 miles from Plumer. Reputedly, it was found by the vibrations of a witch hazel stick, of course. It was a small clearing in the woods, with many pit holes in the earth nearby. In May there was a surge to the area, and in a month the city of Pithole existed. It was said to have 15,000 inhabitants, and the daily volume of mail received was third in the state, next to that of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh." What is it with cities named with a P? Pithole, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. I wonder if there's a conspiracy there. It was a city of shreds and patches. Buildings, all of wood, were constructed in 5 days and sometimes immediately collapsed. Newcomers had to sleep 100 to a barn, paying $1 each, and considered any shelter at all a luxury. But, and they came voluntarily, but, and this is probably partly exaggeration, but in less than a year it had banks, newspapers, and a score of fine hotels. Murphy's Theater had 1,100 seats, and had chandeliers from Tiffany's. An actress who was playing Lady Macbeth one night pleased a patron so much that he tossed a $500 bill to the lady, who interrupted her sleepwalking soliloquy to grab it. A drink of water cost a dime, a pail $1. The standard way to get your mail was to pay $1 to a boy online for his place. Too long of a line to get a paper. I think the amazing thing we see there is the free market creating a city almost out of nothing in the middle of nowhere, and then abandoned as soon as could be pleased. It's, like it says, the short life of the city of Pithole. Ended up receiving as much mail almost as Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. They were the only 2 cities that received more in the state. Then it just disappeared later. So, massive reallocations of resources can and should occur, but should not be done by the state. That is a lesson I think we learn by seeing all of the massive reallocations of wealth in the 1800s, done by private enterprise, voluntarily, by the people. Mostly, and to that extent excusable and useful. The magic city of Pithole, so suddenly conjured from the earth, was as suddenly swallowed up. In February 1866 there were complaints of oil in water wells and water in oil wells. Gushers began to fade, owing, it was said, to a failure of subterranean gas caused by too much drilling. Then fires broke out, followed by a flood. The people decided to evacuate. A curse was on the town. A good part of the population had fled before it was acknowledged that there was no more oil. The pool was a rectangle only 2 miles long and a mile wide. By 1870 there were only a handful left in the ghost city that had disappeared from the map. This saga of Pithole is typical of the riot and recklessness of the regions